Good morning, everybody. Hi, my name's John Ciancio. I am your host today for the Private Eye Nightline. We have Debbie O'Hara in the studio as well. Hi, good morning, Debbie. How are you?
Good morning, John. Good.
Thanks for joining us today. Listeners, we got a great show today. It's a show about the effects or the impact on families and children that divorce or separation and how it affects the family and the children. We invite all listeners to call in with any questions or comments they may have, or just to join in the discussions that we have today. All right, the impact and the effects of separation and divorce is, we in our business, Debbie, we deal a lot with that. Usually we get called in to do surveillance or research on issues for divorce and so forth. But then we visit firsthand the effects. We get caught up in the emotions, the roller coaster, if you will, of clients dealing with children, dealing with spouses, looking to separate, look at the calls for divorce, the custody battles, and everything. So today, let's talk a little bit about what we've seen firsthand. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. When a client calls you, Debbie, and they say, look, my children are having a difficult time. My husband and I, or my wife and I, we're about to go our separate ways. And usually they'll reach out to us to do some investigative work. What do you see? I know, like, a lot of times when I would work with clients, a lot of times the information came not from the spouse, but from a child. Like mommy says this, or daddy's going out tonight. Do you see a lot of that?
Yes, we do.
Okay. What with the case information, when you open up a file and everything like that to set up whether any investigative service, whether it be a hard drive analysis or whether it be a surveillance or so forth, what are you looking to document on like a custody with children? What's the effects that children have on separation and divorce?
It affects them greatly. A lot of people don't realize it. And you get a lot with the parents. They play against each other with the children.
And that's got to be emotionally for an environment for children to be put in, like what the tug of war situation are. Can you go spy on your father for me, or what does your mom tell you? There's a lot of the information when you set up a surveillance job. Who does it come? It comes from the client, but usually it comes from information that is learned from the children, because most communications are broken down between the parents.
Yes. They put the children in the middle. A lot of times they don't realize it, and sometimes they do, but that tears the child apart. It's which parent do they side with?
We've seen firsthand with some of the devastating effects that a separation and divorce could be for kids. It could be anywhere from signs of aggression to depression. It depends on the personality and the demeanor of that child and how that affects those children.
Yes.
All right. Well, they're telling me we have a caller in by the name of Sandy. Sandy, are you there?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, listen, Sandy, thank you for calling in. Appreciate it, the time you set aside. Basically, the show's topic today is about the effects on children and parents that a separation or a divorce will have. Tell us a little bit about what you're going through and what you experienced.
I think the real shame is that, you would hope that people that were married could somehow come to, a consensus about what is really good for the kids. I've been divorced for 14 years now. I have teenagers. And while people kept telling me it'll get better, eventually, my ex-husband might lose interest in being such a bad part of our lives. It hasn't changed. I think he frankly enjoys it. And with the kids, I find that the hardest thing is that no matter what mom tells them, whether, discipline, normal family functions, their dad will always tell them the exact opposite. So, when I'm disciplining them over cell phone use, the first thing they do is start texting their father or calling him, which they're by court order not supposed to do. He's not supposed to talk to them when they're being disciplined. They do it anyway, and it just makes the whole situation escalate, and it makes it harder, and it makes mom the bad guy.
That's a long time. You said divorced for 14 years. Let me ask you this. What recourse, you've been through the court system, have you used parent coordinators or evaluators at all?
Yes, we've actually gone through 2 evaluations, and we've used 2 different types of parent mediation or coordination. And unfortunately, in some respects it works, but it's really only going to work if both parents are actually willing to try to make things better. In my case, my ex believes that, whatever he believes to be the way things should be is the way it should be, period. There's no negotiation. I'm always wrong. And therefore, the value of the mediation was very limited.
What's communications like with that kind of environment? It's got to be very strained. Do you talk over the phone or email or go through the kids? How do you communicate?
We don't speak by phone. Our emails, I try to keep them, very pleasant. Or when I frame an email, I really try to look at it like somebody else might be viewing this, or I'm going to try to look at it from more of a business perspective and try to frame things that way. The emails I get in response, no matter what the trivial topic might be, are generally a little more abusive, or they just don't. It's very unproductive.
The communications that you do have in writing and everything is it confrontational? I mean, is it argumentative? Is there ever a peaceful or a easier transition? I mean, you've been going at this for a long time now. Do you see the light in the tunnel, or is it still fighting and arguing?
No, well, basically, it doesn't appear after all these years that it's going to get better from the other side. So I've just sort of developed ways of try to avoid as much as possible having to have contact with him. And when I do have to, I generally try to do it by email, and I attempt to do it in the in the most business-like or in a manner, like I said, as if somebody were viewing this email other than the 2 of us. I try to do that, and you just try. I mean, unfortunately, it makes it hard. I have teenagers, so I think with the normal sort of misbehavior or acting out of teenagers becomes more difficult when they know that whatever you say will be contradicted by the other parent, and they know they have a shoulder to cry on, essentially, and that they'll be told that I'm wrong, or so right now my children and I talk to a family counselor that has been a good support for me, because they see another adult who is not involved and who is a professional who happens to agree with my parenting.
Okay, and especially with teenagers, it's one thing if they're toddlers or very young at age, but I have 2 teenagers myself, and they're, as most teenagers, they're very opinionated and they try to get away with things, and it's got to be tough when you have an environment when 2 parents aren't even communicating or working together. It's got to be almost like a tug of war situation for you.
Definitely, but I think, while my children, I don't believe, really fight so much, I think that they're essentially kind of given what they want as far as support. I don't believe they typically fight with their father. I don't think they're disciplined or, have chores, that sort of thing, to argue against.
And do you think that's basically you play a role as more of a discipline as far as parenting?
Definitely, yes. I'm definitely the disciplinarian, the one with, I don't need to be their favorite parent. I need to be their. I'm there to be their parent. I'm not there to be their best friend. And I have had to sort of stay the course where, I think it would be tempting for the parent who's trying really hard to do the right thing, where it would be sort of easier to say, I've got so many things in my life that are going on. Maybe I should just be their friend and let them do what they want so that I don't have so much trouble with them. That's not the right thing to do.
No, it's not, and it's probably serves you well. It's got to be very difficult for you now, but it will serve you well later on in years, especially keeping the kids focused and straight and not giving in to every issue, especially with teenagers. Right. And
well, I think so. Unfortunately, even though it's not even that it serves me well in the future, it really serves them well in the future.
Exactly.
They're going to get a real awakening when they get out in the real world.
That's for sure.
And realize that their boss or their professor or, their spouse later in life is not going to bow to them like their father did, or in some cases the mother.
You got to keep them well grounded, and that's what parenting's all about, and not being their best friend, but knowing what's right and what's wrong for them. All right, Sandy, they're telling me we got to go to station break, so I'm going to ask you to hold on, and when we get back, we're going to pick up right where we left off, listeners, okay? So when we get back, we have Debbie O'Hara from Accredited in the studio and Sandy on the phone. Thank you.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated offers a wide array of investigative services to law firms, insurance companies, individuals, private organizations, and corporations. Our goal is to reach the case objectives and resolve the client's issues as quickly and cost-effectively as possible. Local investigative services include identity, wrongful death, drug, alcohol, and abuse, and divorce, support, custody, and family investigations. For more information, call or click today. Accredited Investigations, when you need to know.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated. Professional, licensed private detectives with over 28 years of experience, providing comprehensive nationwide services. Our extensive and diverse team offers discreet and confidential consultations. Our state-of-the-art technology and investigative resources allow us to stay in front of other investigative companies. We welcome the opportunity to earn your trust and deliver you the best service in the industry. Call Accredited Investigations Incorporated at 866-821-5258.
You're listening to the Private Eye Nightline with host John Ciacchio. To ask a question or express a concern about today's program, please call toll-free 1-866-472-5788, 1-866-472-5788. You may also send an email to info@pinightline.com. Now, back to the show.
Okay, hello again, everybody. My name's John Ciacchio. I am the host of the Private Eye Nightline. We have Debbie O'Hara in the studio again from Accredited Investigations. And we have Sandy on the phone, standing by. Sandy, you still with us?
I am.
Okay, great. Look, thank you for sticking with us through the break. Long time. Were you in the courts a lot? Were there motions being filed back and forth, or or was this a fight between you and your ex, or did you get the courts involved?
No, the courts were involved, and I would say about 50-50 of the court dates were actually more over either custody issues or attempting to get a parent coordinator involved to help some of the problems that we were having, and of course the resulting experience that the kids were having, and then half were just my spouse or my ex-spouse repeatedly attempting to reduce child support. or, go about it in every which way, try to reduce that support and then drag it into court instead of at the mediation level.
Sandy, did the children go through much counseling?
No, my ex-husband doesn't believe in counseling at all. So, they were court ordered to minimal counseling a few years back, which I think was taken very lightly. The kids, they had, one counselor did, come out and say there needs to be a far less conflict between the parents. That my daughter was definitely having problems with that, and I know my ex-husband immediately brushed it off and said the conflict was my fault, that he has no part in it. With my son, I think they, since they talked about sports and he's a good student, the counselor sort of brushed off, any problems. I guess because my son didn't bring up issues directly, they never really spoke about it.
I got two questions for you, Sandy. Is the effects for each child or even each parent going through is different, but did you see the effects, the gender, the girl versus the boy, the son versus the daughter, the effects? Did you see at different times which suffered most, or was reached out more cling to you, or was more talkative, or more quiet and withdrawn from you?
Well, I think actually what they tended to do is sort of the same thing. It just progressed, obviously one's older than the other. I think when they were younger, what I really noticed, especially in the youngest one, was that whenever they are in the presence of my ex-husband or his family at a game or some type of event, they were very stiff-looking. They looked very uncomfortable. They would look at me without turning their heads. They would shift their eyes and sort of as if, we see you, we're sort of acknowledging you, but we're not going to come over and say hello or anything like that. And it was, on one occasion I was describing it to somebody, said it was an awful experience because my daughter was probably about 4. She looked like she was on death row. She was walking with her grandparents behind her, walking straight in a line with her head forward, like she was going to try not to see me. And then she shifted her eyes and met mine and continued to walk. And I felt so bad for her because you could tell that it was such an uncomfortable situation for her.
Wow.
It's like they're afraid to love the mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, the environment, it's got to be so thick, to deal with it, to cut through all that. Did you find does it get better as the children get older, or as you get older, that it's working out, or is it getting tougher for you and tougher for your children as they get older?
I think what's tougher about it is that, I think in some cases where with a high, maybe a high conflict divorce, you might have parents who don't really verbally, say things outright to the children. It's just more of I'm sure my children know I would really prefer not to be standing near or around my ex-husband or his family. It's very uncomfortable. I don't verbalize that so much to them, but they're well aware of it. However, my ex-husband, I believe he and his family and his extended family are more verbal to them about their dislike of me. And so it's made, when they were little, on the day of the 50-50 custody transfer, I always knew that first day to just kind of relax with them, that they were very uncomfortable shifting back and forth between custody, and they were different on that day. And as the day progressed, they would be much more comfortable with me and, want to cuddle and that sort of thing. And then all the other days in between would be much better. And then again, as they knew they were going back to their fathers who they loved to go to, my son would act out. And I did speak to a counselor, and that is what, he said he was having trouble with transition. And his acting out or hitting me when he was little were an indicator that he just, mentally was having a hard time leaving me, even though he loved going to his father's house.
Wow, that's so not only do you have to deal with this and still deal with it in each day, but it seems to me like you've been had to contend with this for a long time. How do you survive this emotionally?
Well, it's obviously hard. I think the worst part is that it consumes a lot of your life, because instead of just being able to have a job and raise your children as, you believe they should be raised, there's always this sort of force that you're working against, and that's the person who's telling the kids not to listen to you, that you don't know what you're talking about, that you're mean. So you're always fighting that and trying to get your kids to listen to you and, realize that you are the parent and you do have the ultimate say in your home, and it's for their good. That's what you're fighting against. Otherwise, it's a matter of, yes, it's hard, but I will continue to do it every single day, like I have for the last 14 years, because they're my kids, and I'm not going to lay down and just say, oh well,
It's a never-ending battle. Each day you got to wake up and say, okay, well, what's it going to be today? And you're right. When the kids are leaving or are coming back, is that transition period, which could be a cooling off period or a relaxation period, but it's a never-ending battle. What would you tell our listeners, Sandy? 14 years, I have to tell you, you're an expert probably at this now. What would you tell our listeners to get through what you had to endure or you still are going through each day?
Well, I actually just spoke with somebody that I live near who is contemplating a divorce right now with 3 young kids. And my advice was, as to actually both the husband and wife, is and will always be, whatever you do, you have to come to a place where, you're never going to be, maybe you won't be friends, and maybe you do dislike each other, but you really have to come to some kind of place where it can be good for the kids. You can't fight constantly or have this tug of war of, mom's always wrong or dad's always wrong or mom did this, mom or dad did that. It's so bad for the kids. And, I've tried to take that perspective for the last 14 years. I look at everything like, how is this going to affect the kids? It's going to affect their relationships in the future. It obviously is going to change their relationships with their mom, their dad, but I think that it's definitely, it's painful a lot of times to see sort of misbehavior or things that the kids will do in front of other people that are definitely because of their situation. They somehow don't know better, or they've been taught wrong on how to treat, people. And, it's going to hurt them in the future.
Did you get a lot out of the emotions being filed with the court and the revisiting the court on a lot of these issues, or do you think that A, it was a waste of time, and certainly B, a waste of money?
I think that, I don't know that everybody's divorce is as high conflict as mine. I think there are a lot of people that even if they do, I've seen people who've started out, really fighting and were able to, after a couple of years, kind of call a truce. I think it can be helpful. However, again, the big factor is that you can't just have one parent who wants to compromise or work together or, at least not try to alienate the other parent from the children. In my case, I feel like, the judges and the courts do what they do, and they'll tell you in the end, this is in order. you were expected to follow it, but there's nobody to enforce it. You can't, they're not going to call the police and say, my ex is doing X, Y, or Z, come take him away. That doesn't work that way.
Nah, it's a reality check. And
my ex who are willing to defy court orders or fly just under the radar, essentially. Nothing so bad that, of course, the police would get involved, but constantly undermining the order, counselors' recommendations, things like that just cause upheaval on my end when I'm trying to follow the rules and have my children follow them as well.
Well, I got to tell you, Sandy, good luck, and keep fighting the fight. They're telling me we got to go to station break, and I know you got to go. So, Sandy, I want to thank you for calling in today. You've been, giving our listeners a lot, what I call valued experience. So, thank you and good luck to you today, Sandy.
Thank you.
Listeners, we'll be back. We're going to go to a station break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up with Debbie O'Hara from Accredited Investigations. Thank you.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated offers a wide array of investigative services to law firms, insurance companies, individuals, private organizations, and corporations. Our goal is to reach the case objectives and resolve the client's issues as quickly and cost-effectively as possible. Local investigative services include identity, wrongful death, drug, alcohol, and abuse, and divorce, support, custody, and family investigations. For more information, call or click today. Accredited Investigations, when you need to know.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated. Professional, licensed private detectives with over 28 years of experience, providing comprehensive nationwide services. Our extensive and diverse team offers discreet and confidential consultations. Our state-of-the-art technology and investigative resources allow us to stay in front of other investigative companies. We welcome the opportunity to earn your trust and deliver you the best service in the industry. Call Accredited Investigations Incorporated at 866-821-5258.
You're listening to the Private Eye Nightline with host John Ciacchio. To ask a question or express a concern about today's program, please call toll-free 1-866-472-5788, 1-866-472-5788. You may also send an email to info@pinightline.com. Now, back to the show.
Hi again, John Ciacchio, the host of the Private Eye Nightline. We have Debbie O'Hara in the studio today again. And Debbie, just had a caller from Sandy. Pretty interesting stuff. 14 years going through and it seems never ending, going through major issues with the effects of what a divorce could do. Not
Very
only
difficult, yeah.
to her, but to children.
Mm-hmm.
It seems every day she's got sensitive issues that she's got to contend. I like some of the words that she was using, and hopefully some of the listeners can really relate to that. But the transition, getting the kids ready to go away, they have a 50% visitation. So that means 50% of their time, the kids are out of her care and in her ex-husband's care. That's got to be hard on a transition alone, to get the kids ready, to say goodbye to them, and then to get them acclimated to come back and say hello again, and get them in what I call, keep them in the mainstream, whether it be sports activities, school activities, education. It's got to be very tough.
It is. Now, I would think especially if one parent lived quite a distance away from the other one, then what do they do with their friends? They leave their friends behind. That's a big, big emotional scar right there for these children. They have activities from their school. They can't attend it when they're with the other parent.
That's a good point. I know, we've done cases that where ex-spouses were on opposite sides of the country. I know We did surveillance out in California for a client who she lived in New Jersey, and her ex-husband lived in California, and they were shipping the kid back and forth on the plane. Very tough, very tough. And I don't understand how the courts see that's it's a balancing act, but I don't see how that kind of that effect on the kids is good for them. I just don't.
No, you want to be able to come home and go to your own bedroom, hang out with your own friends, and they're being torn.
They
They
are.
can't relax and just say, okay, I'm going home and that's my life. That's my room, that's my friends.
And maybe let me ask you this, because what I can see with our clients and everything is the courts are following more on the 50-50, regardless whether there was infidelity or other disagreement issues why a marriage is going to be dissolved and end up in divorce. But courts want to enforce a 50-50 visitation, from what I can see.
Yes, you see a lot of that, and I don't understand it. I really don't. They don't take into consideration the background. Like, we'll do background checks if the spouse has a boyfriend or girlfriend. We trying to find, if somebody's going for full custody, they don't take a lot of it into consideration.
No, it's have bag will travel concept with the kids. They're constantly, 1 week here, 1 week there. Or, we used to have a saying out of Pennsylvania courts. A lot of times, the traditional visitation was every other weekend, and one night during the week for dinner.
Yes.
That pretty much is to the wayside now. And now courts are looking to try to get both parents involved and give them a 50% split. It's okay for the parents. They're older, hopefully mature. They can set their schedules to handle that kind of commitment. But the kids being taken out of one home, put into another home.
Right. Right.
I found in a lot of our work is a lot of time was transportation. A lot of it was traveling hours, back and forth, and everything. It's emotionally the kids get affected the most. Let me ask you some questions. What are some of the danger signs to look for when children, in children during a separation or a divorce?
Well, a child could go into a deep depression. They can develop eating disorders, and literally become like a hermit. They could go in their room and just stay there, and then shut themselves off from the entire world. I mean, there's a lot that they're trying to deal with. They could be losing their friends. And every child wants a normal family. You come home, there's mom and dad. And then they're being tossed between one parent and the other parent. And a lot of times you get a parent that turns around and, actually turns the child against the other parent. In other words, brainwashing. So then it makes the child more confused.
Yeah, well, the caller we had prior to the break, Sandy was saying that she actually had to get her children into counseling when they were younger. The little guy would actually hit her and everything. And of course, according to the caller, the child was acting out in the transition, going on, to the fathers and so forth. And, depression, signs of aggression, withdrawal, and these issues can happen very early and when they're young.
Yes.
But say they're older, say they're teenagers, then there's a whole world of different vices, alcohol, drugs, internet dangers, and so forth, and they'll go out and hide into these different troubled areas, whether it be the internet, surfing the internet, or with friends of questionable background, whether it be drugs, alcohol, and so forth. Have you seen a lot of that?
Yeah, it's like they're lashing out, because they're being torn between two parents. They get to the point where they don't trust anybody. and they don't feel that they have anybody to, talk with and explain their fears.
I remember, and still even today, we get a lot of calls saying, that usually our work was mostly geared towards adults, infidelity, child custody, those kind of issues. But a lot of times we would get calls saying, our teenage child or a young adult child is acting out, and they want to put surveillance and so forth. And a lot of times it was from a product of a separation or divorce.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what would you do for a client? Say a client says, look, I want to look at my child's behavior because I don't know where he's at after school, and he comes home late, and his grades are he's tanking on his grades. What would you tell a client on that kind of situation?
Well, depending on the age of the child, I would say I would definitely, if they're on the computer a lot, check the computer, give you some signs of what's going on. You want to get it as early as possible. You can also check the child's cell phone or do surveillance if it gets to that point. Who's he hanging out with? Where's he going? What is he doing?
Yeah, I agree too. You're not, some kids in the makeups, I know with my own two boys, I got one who's, very outgoing, and then I have another one that's very quiet. Early intervention is the best way to get your kids through these kind of situations.
No doubt about it. Nip it in the bud.
And you're right. Doing a hard drive analysis or looking at his cell phone records or surveillance. One of the things that most parents are doing today now are actually putting the child locator. It's a GPS system on cell phones for their kids to know where they are 24/7. I think it's a great way to become educated. To any moment you want to know where your child is, you just look at that GPS tracker.
Yes, definitely.
Some of the sophisticated ones out there now allow not only give you live tracking, but it lets you go back and look to where your child was, yesterday or a week ago. Mm-hmm. And that way, it's a good understanding for the parent. It's a great comfort level as well. Early intervention, though, is the only, is paramount to understand what the effects could be on your child, because every child reacts differently.
Yeah, the best thing is if both, parents got along. The first thing a child's going to think, normally in most situations, is when the parents are divorcing, the child believes it's their fault. It's something they did. So the one most important factor that you have to do is both parents have to get together and let this child know they had nothing to do with it. Mommy and Daddy just didn't get along, and let them know that the child's loved.
Yeah, but you and I both know that's great advice, but it takes two to play nice.
That's it, and it doesn't work that way most times.
And we see with our own clientele, a lot of our clientele are wrapped up in court litigation, heavy fights, questioning whether it be a visitation or trying to change a visitation order. And people have to realize that they're looking to the courts too much to do a lot of different things when they need to work together for the safety of the children.
Yes.
All right. Well, in a minute, we're going to have to go back on the station break again. So when we get back, we're going to talk about some mistakes that parents make. And I want to talk about a study that came out in the 80s as well on the effects on children that divorce would have. So listeners, again, you're listening to the Private Eye Nightline. The show topic, again, is the effects and exposures that parents and children have during separation and divorce. We have Debbie O'Hara in the studio, and when we get back from break, we'll pick up right where we left off. Thank you.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated offers a wide array of investigative services to law firms, insurance companies, individuals, private organizations, and corporations. Our goal is to reach the case objectives and resolve the client's issues as quickly and cost-effectively as possible. Local investigative services include identity, wrongful death, drug, alcohol, and abuse, and divorce, support, custody, and family investigations. For more information, call or click today. Accredited Investigations, when you need to know.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated. Professional, licensed private detectives with over 28 years of experience, providing comprehensive nationwide services. Our extensive and diverse team offers discreet and confidential consultations. Our state-of-the-art technology and investigative resources allow us to stay in front of other investigative companies. We welcome the opportunity to earn your trust and deliver you the best service in the industry. Call Accredited Investigations Incorporated at 866-821-5258.
You're listening to the Private Eye Nightline with host John Ciacchio. To ask a question or express a concern about today's program, please call toll-free 1-866-472-5788, 1-866-472-5788. You may also send an email to info@pinightline.com. Now, back to the show.
Hi, listeners. Again, my name's John Ciacchio. I'm your host today for the Private Eye Nightline. Debbie O'Hare from Accredited Investigations is in the studio. Debbie, this is a great topic we're having today about the impact or the effects on children and parents during separation and divorce. When you're talking to clients every day or each week about these issues and so forth, what are you seeing how the children are impacted by the separation and divorce? What are some of the feelings or emotions being shared with you from the clients?
Well, it's tough on the children, like I said, because, and I don't understand judges sometimes, because a child being, 50-50 with one parent, they leave the one house. Suppose they have a pet there that they adore, they love. This is their best friend in the world. They're missing. They lose their pet. They lose their friends, like I said earlier. They have any school activities, if they're in any sort of sports, and like I said, if the other parent, lives far away, they miss out on all the activities. So it's completely disrupting the child's life.
Yeah.
It's a complete upheaval.
We've seen firsthand when there's fights about religion. Okay, in one household, the child goes to one church or pursues one faith or religion. In the other spouse's household, there's not a word mentioned about that religion or that faith, or doctors visits, or clothing styles, or I've seen even in young kids type of toys. One parent will allow, the other parent will not. And when a child's that young, they don't understand the conflicts that exist and the turmoil that exists between both parents or ex-parents.
It's very difficult, too, when they're very little. I had a client who had 2 little girls, and he would get like 50-50 custody, and he was never informed of anything that pertained to the children. One of the children had bruises on her body. He was told nothing about it. He's not allowed to have any access to any medical records, and it was killing him. He was afraid that his child was in danger. He was notified of absolutely nothing. If the child was taken to an emergency ward, he would be the last person to find out. And the child, like I said, in the end, are suffering.
They are. I think a lot of children is not only the physical, but the mental side of young children's ages. That's when they're developing physically and mentally,
Right.
Psychologically, and those kind of effects could be, if not nurtured, or can be damaging. I mean, there's a fear of change, fear of being abandoned, losing attachment, and the tension between the parents. Trying to cope with that tension for a young child has got to be difficult. I've seen with my clients that how children get through this is better when there's more than one child in that environment, because that's when there's an attachment between the children most of the time.
Right.
It's very difficult when there's only one child,
Yes.
a product of separation or divorce. And that's where I think your parents got to be really in tune to look at the emotional side. Like you said earlier, is the child being withdrawn? Is there a potential, a state of depression that the child's going through? Is there anger issues? Those are important issues, because if not, call early.
Right.
Once that child gets into teenage years, it's a whole nother way of life, a whole nother walk of life.
A lot of problems down the
A
road.
lot of problems, and that's, according to the listener earlier, Sandy, therapy. She was a definite believer, but her ex-spouse wasn't. And that's sometimes we have to put our needs and wants on the back burner, and we have to think of our children first.
And I don't see him doing that.
No,
He's completely selfish.
that's it. And at what cost?
At the children's cost.
Exactly. Some of the mistakes what do you see some of the mistakes that parents are making that are affecting the children after the separation or divorce?
Well, you get a lot of parents that'll use children actually as a spy. What's your mommy doing, or what's daddy doing? What are they saying about such and such? Putting the child in the middle is the worst thing you could do.
So the spying is, and we see it firsthand. We're asked to go out and do a surveillance because a client will call and say, "Look, my child came home and said, father's seeing someone, or mommy is got a boyfriend," or so forth. A lot of that intelligence information that when we go out and set up an investigation is coming from children.
Yes, we've done several with info from the children.
They're the eyes and ears. Like Sandy, the caller earlier. There's no communication. They email back and forth, and at best, that's their means of communication. So the children are not only in the front line, but they're the eyes and ears.
Yes.
What's some of the other mistakes that children are making? That parents are making that are affecting the children?
Pretty much making the kids on their own, making their own decisions. Even though both parents have 50-50 custody, both of them doesn't mean that they're as, what's the word I'm thinking of, as predominant in the child's life. There's a lot of parents out there, okay, I have 50-50 custody, but they're not in with the child. They're not spending time with the child or talking with them or doing activities with them. The kid will just go to the room, close the door, and do whatever they want to do. Sometimes it's done out of spite.
And a lot of times we see that with our own clientele. Sometimes they're emotionally spent. They're drained.
Yes.
They've isolated themselves, even when their children are in the same house underneath the same roof.
Right.
They're so beaten. They are so emotionally drawn that they lose that center, that communications with their children, being involved in their children's life and everything. Mm-hmm. They're so determined sometimes to fight it out, slug it out, or find out what the infidelities are, or who's sleeping with who, that they lose firsthand the effects on the children.
It's like they're beat down, and they just have no more in them to fight.
And not only that, but then let's flip it. On the other side is they're so aggressive in their children's lives that all they do is dismiss and taint their ex-spouse's credibility with the children. They say bad things, or they can't do this. They're constantly bringing the children into the forefront of demeaning their father or their mother.
And that's what Sandy was going through, and that's the worst thing you could do with a child.
Yeah, I can tell you. In the 80s, there was a study done, and it was basically, again, I'm just talking about the understanding of this study. It was basically done on the effects of divorce on children. And in the 80s, it was played that the divorce itself was such a devastating effect that a lot of children were actually hurt by. But that study was revisited in early on in 2000, and it was restudied, and it determined that it's not the divorce that affected the children. It was how the parents acted and prepared their children for
Yes.
the divorce. And it showed that many children, product of divorces, were able to come through that and lead very successful lives and go out and find marriage, find love, and be very productive adults. It's the effects that the divorce, and it's got to start and end with the parents.
It does.
Getting those kids through it.
That's why I'd highly recommend counseling. Like in Sandy's situation, it's pretty much her against the husband and his family.
Yeah, it
So
sure
the
is.
only help she has is to go to counseling, like she said, and then the children see another person's point of view.
Yeah, it's got to. Well, listeners, they're telling me that we're at the end of our show today. You've been listening to the Private Eye Nightline. I want to thank Debbie O'Hara for being in the studio today. I want to thank Sandy, who was the call-in earlier in the beginning of the show. My name's John Ciacchio. I am your host. We will be back here next week. All right, Friday.
Thanks again for joining us this week. The Private Eye Nightline will be back next Friday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Variety Channel. John Ciacchio hopes to have you tune in again next week.